I never thought that pouring a second glass of wine would be the moment my entire life snapped in half. From the hallway just around the corner, I heard Derek's voice, louder than usual, drunk, laughing too hard. He was talking to his friends, thinking I was asleep or maybe just too old to hear. She's too stupid to realize I'm not even her real son. I've been draining her accounts for years. Laughter followed, ugly roaring, the kind that made you feel small, like a joke being told from a stage you didn't know you were standing on. I didn't cry, I didn't gasp, I didn't storm into the room. I just stood there, the wine glass trembling in my hand, the edge of the carpet pressing against my toes like it might keep me from falling. My fingers went numb around the stem, the Chardonnay slashed against the side, and I remember thinking absurdly that I'd just cleaned the floor. He knew all these years. I thought he didn't know, that maybe I'd tell him one day, gently, lovingly, when it felt right. I'd explain how my sister had handed me his baby body in a hospital waiting room and whispered, just for a little while. That little while turned into forever. Diapers, school lunches, heartbreaks, college applications. I was mom, always mom, and he knew. He knew and still did this. He used it. He used me. I walked away before they could see me, slipped down the hall into the dark, quiet kitchen. The wine glass was still in my hand, but I couldn't feel it anymore. I set it down on the counter and stared out the window at the garden I used to plant just for him. Sunflowers and snap peas because he liked them when he was little, or maybe I just told myself he did. My ears buzzed. The laughter still echoed in the walls or maybe just in my skull. I kept replaying what he said. Not even her real son. Not even like all the scraped knees and school meetings and Christmases meant nothing. Like the sleepless nights holding him through nightmares, through fevers, through breakups, all of it had been invisible or maybe just convenient. He wasn't my blood, but I loved him more than my own life, and now I didn't even recognize him. I should have screamed, should have stormed in there and thrown every lie back in his face, but I didn't. I just stood there until my legs gave out, and I had to sit on the cold kitchen tile like a broken appliance, waiting to be hauled away. That's when I realized something sharp and simple. I'd raised a man who thought love was a debit card, and I didn't know what was more painful, that he said it or that he believed it. I walked up the stairs slowly. Each step felt heavier than the last. In my closet, behind the winter coats, was a rusted metal box I hadn't touched in years. My hands knew the combination by muscle memory. Inside was the letter, the one my sister wrote with her frantic handwriting, begging me to take Derek just for a while. Her mind wasn't well then. She knew it, I knew it. She promised she'd come back for him. That just for a while became a decade, then two, then my entire life. My entire life. I read the letter again. The paper smelled like the past, old ink, dried tears. I held it like it was made of glass. He must have found it. That was the only explanation. He found it and used it. I looked around my bedroom. The photos, the drawings he made in kindergarten, the best mom mug on the shelf, lies, all of them. He never asked questions growing up, not once. I thought it was because he didn't need to. I thought love was enough, but now I wonder, was he just buying time? I got up before the sun. The air was thick and silent, like the house itself knew something had shifted. I walked barefoot across the carpet and opened the closet again. The metal box sat where I left it, but now it looked smaller somehow, less sacred, just another object that had failed to protect me. I opened it anyway. The letter was still there, folded neatly, exactly the way I had left it. But now I studied the creases. Had Derek unfolded it? Had he read it and carefully put it back, or had I left a trail so obvious that a grown man digging through my past had found the most vulnerable part of me without even having to look that hard? It hit me like a slap how stupid I had been. I trusted him blindly, trusted that he saw me as his mother because I acted like one. I thought love made me immune. I thought I was safe. In that box was more than just a letter. There were other things I'd buried. Documents, Photos, my sister's medical notes, proof of how long I'd been protecting him, of how much I'd sacrificed, of how much I didn't tell him because I didn't want him to feel unwanted. And now he used me. I looked at the family photos around the room. Suddenly, they felt like props, staged memories of a life I thought we shared. I should have noticed the signs, the distance in his voice, the way he offered to handle my mail, to help with online payments, the times he swore something was sent when it never arrived. But I didn't want to doubt him. He was my boy. I still wanted that to be true. Grief isn't just about death. It's about finally seeing someone you love clearly and realizing they never saw you the same way. So I sat there with the box on my lap and whispered it once more, but this time not with hope. You were my boy, but you're not anymore. I tried to function the next day. I really did. I made the bed, boiled water for tea, put on my cardigan like nothing inside me was screaming. But every movement felt performative, like I was playing house in a life that wasn't mine anymore. The Derek who used to call me mom wasn't real. That version was gone. And the man I had now, he was a stranger who used my kindness like a checkbook. Still, I kept asking myself, why now? If he knew he wasn't mine all along, why wait this long to use it against me? Why keep up the charade for decades just to throw it away in a drunken brag? Unless it wasn't sudden at all. Maybe it had been happening for years, and I was just too blind to notice. That's when I opened the filing cabinet in the study. I don't know what I expected, maybe some misplaced bills, a few old tax returns, but as I sifted through my paperwork, a heavy knot formed in my stomach. There were withdrawals I didn't remember making, significant ones, thousands over time. Each withdrawal slipped neatly under my radar, just small enough not to trigger alarm, just frequent enough to matter. I opened my bank app and scrolled through months, then years. Then I printed them all. Next came the letters. I found envelopes I thought had been mailed, things I'd asked Derek to post for me, letters to the pension office, the water bill, a check to a local charity, all still here, unsealed and tucked in between them. A copy of a loan application I didn't remember signing, my name, my address, my social security number, but the handwriting wasn't mine. The signature was familiar, not mine, but close enough to fool someone who wasn't looking too hard. The loan amount, $15,000. I felt like vomiting. My hands shook as I flipped the pages. At the top was a lending company I'd never heard of, a digital-only lender, the kind where identity checks were flimsy at best. Suddenly, I remembered the time my credit card got declined at the pharmacy, how Derek had laughed and said it was probably a glitch. I remembered how he offered to take care of it and then brought me ice cream, like a son making amends for a harmless mistake. But it wasn't harmless, it was a test, and I failed. I sank to the floor of the study, my legs giving out beneath me. Around me, the walls of this house felt like they were closing in. Every photo, every holiday card, every piece of evidence that I had given my life to a lie. It wasn't just betrayal, it was theft not just of money, but of trust, of time, of identity. Derek hadn't made a mistake, he had made a decision, and I needed to start making mine. The kettle clicked off like any other morning. I poured my tea, the chamomile blend he always teased me for, and let the steam warm my face while I leaned against the kitchen counter. Through the window, the garden looked just as it always had, a little overgrown, still mine. I heard Derek's footsteps before I saw him. His gait was sloppy, he was hungover, no doubt recovering from the night before when he'd casually joked about ruining my life. I heard him groan, then mumble something about coffee as he stumbled into the kitchen, rubbing his temples. He didn't even glance at me. "Rough night?" I asked quietly, slipping a spoon into my mug. He grunted, "What else is new?" The audacity. He sat at the table in his wrinkled t-shirt, scrolling through his phone with the same fingers he'd used to forge my name. I stood there smiling gently, offering him a slice of toast. He didn't know. He thought I was still asleep, not just last night, but always. He thought I was still the woman who believed every excuse, every delay, every word out of his mouth. I sat down across from him, watching him scroll. "Anything interesting?" I asked lightly. "Just job stuff," he muttered. "You wouldn't understand." He didn't notice how long. I stared. He didn't see how tight my grip was around the mug because I wasn't trying to stop him anymore. I was watching him, every movement, every pause, every time his eyes darted toward the study door like something inside was still calling to him. I wondered what else he had touched, what other drawers he had rifled through while I slept. But I gave him nothing, not a hint, not a flinch. "Don't forget the trash," I said, rising with my mug in hand. Yeah, he muttered, and that was it. No confrontation, no fight, just a quiet morning between a mother and son. Except he wasn't really my son anymore, and I wasn't just a mother. I was a witness now, a strategist. When he left the kitchen to take a shower, I waited until the water started running. Then I opened the study door and scanned for anything out of place. The desk drawer was ajar by half an inch, a file had been pulled slightly forward, and the small tear in the rug near the cabinet shifted just enough that I knew he'd been in here again. I knelt and pressed my hand beneath the cabinet, feeling for the envelope I had placed there years ago, an old family photo, just in case I ever forgot what love used to look like. It was still there, but something else clicked in me. He wasn't hiding this anymore. He was getting bolder. That meant I had to start hiding too, but not my fear, not my hurt, my plan. The quiet became my armor. I moved through the house like I always did, dusting, folding laundry, checking the mail, but this time I was cataloging everything, mentally photographing drawers, folders, even Derek's tone when he offered to take care of that for me. He had stopped pretending to be grateful. Somewhere along the way, he'd started treating me like furniture, convenient, stationary, dumb. And now I was watching him watch me. He wasn't careful anymore. That was his mistake. He believed I was harmless. Maybe I was once, but not anymore. One afternoon, while he was out running errands, he'd said, which probably meant stopping at the bank, I opened the filing cabinet again. But this time I went deeper. I lifted the folders, peeled back the manila tabs, and found what I had long ignored: bank statements, utility bills, all accounted for, but 3 months of checkbook stubs were missing. 3 months. I knew he'd been helping me mail bills around that time. He told me the post office had changed their pickup times and offered to get it out quicker. I'd thanked him for it. I felt sick. I pulled up the rug under the study desk and opened the loose floorboard. Years ago, I used to hide holiday money for Derek in there. He never knew about it, or so I thought. Now even that memory felt like a lie. I reached in and found the envelope I'd taped to the underside. It was empty. Every time I turned around, something else was missing. So I got methodical. I started locking doors, nothing obvious, just a soft click. When I went into the sewing room, I found a new box with a combination lock tucked behind my winter fabrics. The financial records I could find. Copied quietly, patiently, one folder at a time, I began making lists in a small notebook I kept under my pillow. Every inconsistency, every signature I didn't recognize, every smirk that didn't match his words. Then I remembered something that had slipped past me until now. 3 Christmases ago, I asked Derek to mail out my will update. I had signed it, sealed it, and handed it to him. He never brought it back. I asked about it twice. "They're processing it," he told me. "Those things take forever." That was before I noticed the envelope hadn't even been stamped. Now I knew he hadn't mailed anything, and if I requested a copy from my lawyer's office, what would I find? My chest tightened. The next morning, I moved like I always did, slow, measured, invisible. But inside, something had hardened. The sadness was still there, sure, but now it lived underneath something sharper. I wasn't mourning anymore. I was planning. After Derek left, same time as always, just after 10 a.m., claiming he had meetings, I went to the electronics drawer and pulled out the camera I used to film my quilting tutorials. I hadn't touched it in 2 years. It still worked, still held a full battery. That afternoon, I installed it above the bookshelf in the study, tucked between photo albums and old Reader's Digest volumes. Its lens pointed directly at my desk drawers, just in case he went snooping again. I needed proof. I checked the angle, hit record, and closed the door gently behind me. Later that evening, I sat in the sewing room, my sanctuary, the one place Derek never had any interest in. He used to call it Mom's quiet cave, and I let him believe it was harmless, a place for thread and fabric. But now it was my war room. I brought in my laptop and connected the camera feed through a private app. Every night, I'd sit there piecing together my quilt and watching the playback from that day. 2 days passed. Nothing. On the third night, I watched as Derek crept into the study just after midnight. No lights, no hesitation. He pulled open the middle drawer, the one with my checkbook, tax forms, and power of attorney documents. His fingers were practiced calm, like he'd done it 100 times before. I leaned closer to the screen. He pulled out a folder, flipped through it, paused, then took out a single sheet and slipped it into his hoodie pocket. I stopped breathing. He glanced over his shoulder, shut the drawer, and walked out like he was taking a snack. No guilt, no panic, just routine. I hit pause and stared at the frozen frame, his face half-lit by moonlight, mouth curled into a slight grin. I sat there a long time, my hands still on the fabric in my lap. Then I reached for my notebook and wrote one word: enough. The next day, I changed my online banking passwords quietly, carefully. Then I booked an appointment with a new lawyer under the name of a charity I used to volunteer with. He wouldn't recognize it. I opened a P.O. box at the post office 2 towns over so none of my mail would come to the house anymore. He didn't notice a thing. I asked why I wasn't cooking dinner that night. I told him I had a headache. When he joked about Mom getting forgetful, I laughed with him because forgetful is what he wanted me to be, and that's what made me dangerous. The lawyer didn't flinch when I showed her the documents, but her eyes said everything. I had been robbed slowly, expertly, and without a trace of remorse. Her name was Julia Hastings, quiet, sharp, early 40s, with sleeves rolled up like she didn't have time for small talk. She didn't need the whole story, just the evidence. I gave her copies of the bank statements, the printouts from my camera footage, and the forgery I'd pulled from the filing cabinet. She read in silence, flipping pages with a surgical calm that somehow made it all feel even worse. When she finally looked up, her words were soft, measured. This isn't just identity theft. This is sustained financial abuse. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't cry. I was long past crying. Julia slid the folder closer. These signatures, they're definitely not yours. And based on the frequency and amounts, we're looking at over $50,000 siphoned from your accounts over 5 years. $50,000. The number didn't feel real, but I saw it in black and white: withdrawals I never made, credit lines I never opened. Even an online lender I'd never heard of had issued a short-term loan under my name 2 years ago for $12,000, defaulted and still accruing interest. He had used my address, my phone number, my birth date. Julia leaned forward. We can report this immediately, Bank Fraud Division, police. I'd also recommend we begin revoking any access he has to your financial records. She tapped the will I'd brought in. This needs to be rewritten immediately. My voice cracked for the first time in weeks. I told him he was everything. I gave him everything. Julia didn't say he doesn't deserve it. She didn't need to. I could see it in her eyes. I think I was grateful she didn't try to comfort me. I didn't want comfort. I wanted control. We outlined next steps. I would close the accounts he had access to, open new ones, and authorize Julia as my legal representative. She would file the preliminary fraud report and then work with my bank to recover what we could. When she asked if I had any other financial assets, I paused. I thought about the small lockbox hidden in my sewing cabinet, the old life insurance policy, the inheritance from my aunt that Derek never knew about. I looked her straight in the eye. Yes, and I want all of it removed from his name, every dollar. Julia nodded. Then we'll need to restructure your estate, and I'll draw up a temporary injunction to keep him from accessing anything else while we investigate. That night, I sat in my car for a long time before driving home. I watched the lights inside my house flicker. Derek was home already, probably on the couch, probably scrolling through the same apps he used to monitor my accounts, probably thinking he still had time to drain me dry. He didn't know the locks were changing. He didn't know the storm was already moving beneath him when I got home. Derek was exactly where I expected, sprawled on the living room couch, flipping through TV channels with the kind of ease you only have when the house you live in doesn't cost you anything. "Hey," he called without looking up. "You were out late. Everything okay?" I smiled. "Just errands. Get groceries." "No," I said, sitting on the edge of the armchair across from him. "Didn't feel like cooking tonight." He blinked. "That's new." I shrugged. "We all change." He grunted and turned back to the screen. That was the last real conversation we had for a week. Each day, I made small moves, invisible ones. I started with the easy things, unsubscribed him from my digital accounts, rerouted my mail to the new P.O. box, and notified my financial advisor that I'd be consolidating accounts. He never asked why I stopped leaving bills on the hall table for him to take care of. He never noticed that the folders in the study were growing thinner. What he did notice eventually was the silence. I wasn't asking him for help anymore, wasn't letting him sort the mail, wasn't reminding him when the mortgage was due or that the tax prep appointment was coming up. I stopped being the system he exploited, and it rattled him. He started hovering more, wandering into the study for no reason, asking odd questions at dinner like, "Hey, did you ever end up doing something with that inheritance from Aunt Ruth? Or what bank did we use to set up your utilities again?" I just smiled. "You handled that, remember?" He didn't push, not yet, because he still believed he had time. But behind the scenes, I was closing account after account. I opened a new checking account under the estate planning trust Julia and I created, shifted my direct deposit from Social Security, even closed the account that paid the property taxes and paid them early just to be safe. I rewrote my will that week in a small, quiet office downtown. No fanfare, no lawyers who had known Derek since he was a child, just Julia, 2 witnesses, and my signature. His name didn't appear once. And for the first time in decades, I felt like I could exhale. I came home that night to the sound of Derek on the phone, laughing with someone about Mom's weird behavior lately. He said I was probably just going senile. I stood in the hallway, listening to him mock me, still convinced I was clueless. He thought silence meant weakness. He had no idea what silence could do. He still thought the money was his, that I was just too fragile, too tired, too soft to do anything without him. He hadn't noticed how far I'd already gone. The second meeting with Julia felt different. This time, I walked in with my head high, not dragging a folder of damage, but carrying a list of what I wanted next. We called it estate planning. I told Derek that's what I was doing too, just in case something happens. I said over coffee, my voice light, wouldn't want to leave a mess behind. He barely looked up from his phone. "Smart," he muttered. "You should have done that." Years ago, I smiled. "You're right, the new financial advisor Julia introduced me to was young, sharp, and asked all the right questions." He didn't blink when I said I needed new accounts created immediately, with no online access except through my attorney. He nodded and got to work. By the end of the week, I had 3 new accounts: retirement, emergency, and one for long-term investments I hadn't touched since Derek was in high school, all under the new trust, all secure. I added power of attorney to Julia and revoked it from Derek. The form had his name on it in bold from years ago, back when I thought I was just being responsible, just in case something ever happened to me. I stared at it for a long time before signing the revocation. It felt like cutting off a phantom limb, one I'd been pretending wasn't rotting. The following afternoon, I visited the local credit union. The woman behind the desk looked confused when I said I wanted to close my primary account. "You've been with us a long time," she said. Yes, I said, too long. She nodded slowly. She didn't ask questions, but I caught the flicker in her eyes when I requested that all automatic transfers and linked accounts be severed. Would you like to keep anyone else authorized on the new one? No, just me. I walked out of the bank feeling 10 pounds lighter. That night, Derek asked me why the electric bill notice came by mail instead of online. They must have updated something, I said, flipping through a magazine. You know how systems are. He nodded, didn't press, because he wasn't watching closely anymore. He'd already counted me out, and that was my freedom. By the end of the month, every dime was locked in accounts he couldn't touch. Every document was secured, every password changed, and not a single confrontation, just the quiet tightening of a noose he didn't even know was there. It didn't happen with a scream or a fight, just a glance across the room. That was the moment I knew I didn't love him anymore. He was lying on the couch again, same spot, same blank stare, phone glowing inches from his face, legs propped up on the throw pillows I used to fluff every morning. The blanket I crocheted for his 30th birthday was crumpled under his feet, forgotten. He didn't even notice me watching. That used to hurt. For years, I thought I was invisible to him because he was distracted, or busy, or just tired. I used to twist myself into forgiveness, trying to understand. Maybe I wasn't warm enough. Maybe I wasn't the kind of mother who gave big hugs or made cookies from scratch. Maybe if I had been different, he wouldn't have turned out like this. But watching him now, slack-jawed, smug, and so sure he still held the upper hand, I saw it clearly. He wasn't distracted. He was entitled. And I wasn't invisible to him. I was just conquered. He thought I'd been conquered years ago. That's what broke the spell. I felt it like a pin snapping inside my chest, clean and precise. The place in me that used to ache for his approval was gone, the longing gone, the guilt. Like frost and morning light, I didn't love him anymore. I didn't hate him either. I just saw him for what he was, a man who had used my love like a leash and expected me to stay tethered to it forever. He laughed at something on his phone, some meme probably, some dumb joke he wouldn't remember 5 minutes later. Then he looked up at me and smirked. What? I realized I had been staring. Nothing, I said quietly. Just thinking. Don't hurt yourself, he chuckled. I nodded once and walked away. I stood in the hallway for a full minute, not because I was upset, but because I needed to feel the clarity settle. It was like stepping outside after a storm and realizing the ground beneath your feet is solid again. I didn't love him, and because of that, I was free to do what needed to be done next, without guilt, without hesitation. That night, I opened a new folder on my laptop labeled Police. I started organizing the footage from the hidden camera, the one that caught him forging my name, the one that showed him digging through my private documents. I added scans of the loan applications, the suspicious withdrawals, the power of attorney revocation form. I recorded a short video of myself explaining it all calm, clear, unmistakable, and then I emailed Julia. Subject: ready when you are. She replied within 20 minutes. We'll file first thing Monday, protective order, formal report, and full estate lock. We're almost there. I closed the laptop and walked into the living room one last time. Derek was already half asleep. The TV flickered in front of him, playing a rerun of some show he didn't even care about. I looked at him like a stranger on a train, someone I used to know once, but who now had no bearing on my future. I turned off the light and left him there. I used to cry when I filled out forms. Now I was filing charges, and for the first time in years, I felt untouchable. Monday came. I didn't feel nervous. I put on a navy blouse, the one I used to wear when I worked front desk at the clinic, and pinned my hair up the way I did before Derek called me frumpy. I even wore earrings, small gold studs, my version of armor. The courthouse was quiet, cool. Everything smelled like paper and carpet cleaner. Julia met me in the hallway with a folder in hand. Once this is filed, she said gently, everything changes. You sure you're ready? I didn't hesitate. More than ready. She smiled, not with pity, but with respect. We sat with the fraud investigator. First, I showed them everything. The footage of Derek sneaking into the study, the forged checks, the signature comparisons. I answered questions clearly, without shaking. When they asked if I believed Derek was a danger to me, I looked them straight in the eye and said, "He doesn't need fists to hurt people. Look what he's already done." Then came the protective order. Julia had already filled out the bulk of it. I just signed. They would serve him in the next 48 hours. After that, he'd be legally banned from accessing any of my accounts, contacting my attorney, or entering my home, reclaiming my property without written permission. I wasn't just reclaiming my finances, I was reclaiming my house. The eviction notice took longer. Julia said we had to make it airtight, no loopholes, no delays. Derek would have 30 days from the day of service to vacate, but the moment he received that letter, he'd know the game was over. When she slid the envelope across the table toward me, heavy, sealed, final, I didn't feel relief. I felt ready. That afternoon, I walked into the sunroom and invited Derek to brunch the following weekend. Like old times, I said. He raised a brow. "You're not usually the sentimental type." I smiled. Just felt like doing something nice. He agreed without question. Why wouldn't he? He still thought I was his fool. The rest of the week, I prepared silently. I scanned backup copies of every legal form into 2 different flash drives. I emailed a copy to Julia and saved one in a folder labeled Sunroom Delivery. I changed the alarm system's access codes, only I knew the new ones. I even found the old safe in the hall closet and reset the combination. Inside, I placed every document that still had my name on it and none that had his. He came and went like always, ate the food I bought, used the Wi-Fi I paid for, slept under a roof I held together. But this time, I didn't flinch because he didn't know the walls were already closing in. He thought it was brunch, thought I was softening, thought I missed him. And for the first time, I let him believe it, just long enough to hand him the envelope. The table was set by 10 a.m. exactly. I used the blue china he liked, the ones he always bragged about to guests as if they were his to give. I made the egg salad he once called the only thing you cook right, even brewed his favorite coffee. I wasn't trying to impress him, I was staging the moment. He walked in wearing a smug little grin, whistling like a man without a care. "Wow," he said, scanning the table. "Did someone die?" I smiled. "Not yet." He laughed, plopped into his seat, and poured himself a full cup. "This looks amazing, Ma." I poured mine slower, steady. We ate quietly. He talked about some trip he was planning with friends, dropped hints about money. I nodded in all the right places, sipped my coffee, refilled his cup when he finished it. I didn't say much, just smiled. I watched him eat like it was any other morning, like the last 5 months hadn't peeled the skin from my life inch by inch. When he reached for the last triangle of sandwich, I stood. "There's something I've been meaning to give you." He raised an eyebrow, chewing. "Yeah?" I walked to the buffet, picked up the thick envelope, came back to the table, and laid it gently in front of his plate. He looked at it like it was a gift card. "What's this?" "Open it." He chuckled, wiped his mouth, and tore it open without hesitation. He glanced at the first page, the eviction notice, and let out a laugh. "Funny." He flipped to the next, a police report, then another, a fraud case reference, notarized will revision, power of attorney revocation. His laugh faded. The stack thudded as he set it down. "What the hell is this?" I leaned forward, my voice quiet. "It's your final warning." He scoffed. "You're kidding." "No, Derek, I'm not. You've been removed from every account, every document. You'll be served by the end of the day. You have 30 days to leave this house." He shoved the papers away. "You're being ridiculous. I have video of you forging my signature, bank records, surveillance footage, witnesses, and a lawyer who doesn't need your permission to represent me." His eyes narrowed. "I'm your son." I held his gaze. "No, you're not. You were someone I raised, someone I loved, but what you are now is a thief." His voice rose. You'd throw me out over money? No, I said. I'm throwing you out because you took everything from me, not just money, my dignity, my peace, my trust, and you didn't even blink. He stood. You think you can survive without me? I stood too and smiled. I already am. He stared at me, jaw twitching, hands clenching and unclenching, but I didn't move. He looked down at the envelope, then back at me, like he still thought he could flip this. He couldn't. Brunch was over. He tried to laugh it off until the screen lit up, until the footage rolled, until every lie he ever told came back to haunt him in my voice, on my terms. Derek scoffed, like I'd handed him a parking ticket. He pushed the papers aside and leaned against the kitchen island, like this was all beneath him. You're not actually doing this, he said, shaking his head. Come on, Ma. Don't be dramatic. I tilted my head. You think I went to a lawyer for fun? He chuckled, but it sounded hollow now. So what? You're kicking me out after everything? You think anyone's going to believe this? I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into the drawer under the sideboard, the one he always ignored, and pulled out my tablet, already queued up, already loaded. I set it on the table between us and pressed play. At first, there was silence, then the black and white footage lit up the screen. The study, my desk, 12:17 a.m. Derek's figure appeared, hoodie drawn up, moving quietly through the dark. He froze. The video showed him rifling through my tax forms, then opening the center drawer, taking out a checkbook, holding a page up to the light, pulling out one of my documents, and slipping it into his pocket. Clear as day. He stepped back from the screen, hands half raised. What the hell is this? You stealing from the woman who raised you? He barked out a nervous laugh. This doesn't prove anything. I could have been. I'm not done, I said, cutting him off. I swiped to the next clip, the one where he signed my name on a loan application form. I had filmed it from the sewing room, zoomed in through the glass when he didn't know I was watching. The handwriting matched the forged loan application exactly, same pen, same corner of my desk. Still want to play dumb? I asked. He opened his mouth, closed it, then sneered. You're really going to ruin my life over this? No, I said calmly. You did that. I pushed the will revision toward him. You are no longer the beneficiary of anything, not the house, not the insurance, not even the car title. He picked up the papers, eyes darting across them like he was trying to find a loophole. There's nothing left in your name, I said softly. Not 1 cent. Jesus Christ, he muttered, slamming the folder shut. You're insane. I stepped closer, not trembling, not shrinking. No, Derek, I'm awake. You confused my silence for stupidity, but I was documenting, preparing, taking back what's mine. His jaw flexed. I'm still your son. I looked at him for a long time. No, I whispered. You were a guest in my life, and now your time is up. The screen behind us faded to black. The room stayed quiet, then the doorbell rang right on cue. Derek flinched. Who the hell? I didn't answer because I already knew. Derek didn't move when the doorbell rang. He stood there like a boy caught sneaking candy, only this time, the consequences weren't just a scolding, they were legal, permanent. I walked past him without a word and opened the door. 2 uniformed officers stood on the porch, calm but unmistakably official. One held a clipboard. The other scanned the house with practiced awareness. Marilyn Forrester? One asked gently. I nodded. He's in the kitchen. Derek's voice rang out behind me. This is ridiculous. You can't just call the cops on your own son. He stormed toward us, arms flailing, face flushed. She's confused. I didn't steal anything. I was helping her with paperwork. One officer stepped inside calmly, holding up a hand. Sir, we're here on a preliminary fraud report filed by Miss Forrester. We need you to remain calm while we speak. I didn't do anything. Derek snapped. She's making this up because I'm not her real son. The air snapped cold. There it was, the first time he'd said it out loud, not to his drunk friends, not in a joke, to me, to my face. And that's when I pulled my last card from my pocket, a small digital recorder, one he didn't know existed. I pressed play. The sound filled the room. Dude, she doesn't even know you're not even her real kid, and you're bleeding her dry. You're a legend, man. Cheers to that. Laughter. Another voice, she's too sentimental to notice. I've got access to everything. She trusts me with her life. More laughter, then a toast, clinking. The officer raised an eyebrow. Derek's color drained from his face. That's not. I didn't know you recorded that. No, I said evenly. Your friend sent it to me after you bragged about it at his bachelor party. Said he felt guilty. You should choose better company. The second officer stepped forward. Now, sir, based on this evidence and the documentation provided by Miss Forrester, we're issuing a formal notice to appear. You'll need to vacate this residence per the terms of the legal eviction order. You're no longer authorized to be here. I lived here. Derek barked, panic slipping through the cracks. She raised me. This is my home too. I looked him in the eye. No, it was my gift, and you turned it into a transaction. His voice cracked. I just took what was mine. That's the thing, I said, stepping. The officers, none of it was yours. He backed up toward the hallway like he was calculating his next move, but it was too late. Every card had been played, every lie undone. As the officers explained the next steps, Derek looked at me one last time, not with anger, but with fear. Because for the first time in his life, I wasn't trying to save him. The officers gave him an hour to gather his things. They said it was time to avoid escalation, but Derek didn't pack. He paced, he argued, he begged, then barked, then sulked. I sat in the sunroom, hands folded in my lap while the police explained his rights. I didn't interrupt, I didn't plead, I didn't offer him tea. He tried every trick he had left. He came to the threshold of the room and looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in years. Tell them you made a mistake, he whispered. Please don't let it end like this. I didn't answer. His eyes darted to the floor. I was just desperate. You don't get it. Living in this place, everything's easy for you. You don't know what it's like out there. I tilted my head. You mean out there where people earn what they have? He flinched. You never once said thank you, I added softly. Not for the roof, the clothes, the food, not for raising you when your mother left. Not once. He swallowed. I thought you knew I was grateful. No, Derek, you thought I was disposable. The officer stepped closer. Sir, you need to gather your belongings now. He blinked. You really hate me that much? I stood. No, I said. I don't hate you, but I finally love myself enough to stop letting you destroy me. That stunned him. He stood there, shoulders falling, his face flickering with anger, shame, confusion, like a man who just now realized the ground beneath him was never solid. He turned slowly and walked to his room. I heard drawers open, a suitcase zip, the bathroom door creak. When he came out again, his duffel was half packed, his jacket in his arms. He didn't look at me, but I looked at him. For the first time, I saw not a son, not even a betrayer, just a man who thought manipulation was love and entitlement was family. The officers flanked him gently as they walked toward the door. He hesitated, hand on the knob, eyes still not meeting mine. I hope you're happy, he muttered. I stepped forward just enough for him to hear me clearly. I'm not happy, I said, but I'm free. The door shut behind him. The silence that followed was vast, not empty, cleansing. I stood in the entryway, the echo of his absence lingering like dust in a sunbeam. For years, I'd lived under the weight of him, his moods, his laziness, his needs. Now the space he left behind felt like oxygen. I didn't cry, I didn't celebrate. I just stood there with my hand on the doorknob, breathing. It was over. I walk now, early, quiet, alone, and I cook for myself. Small meals just enough. I don't wait for anyone else to eat. I stopped making extra because I no longer set a place for someone who only ever saw me as a convenience. The police never filed criminal charges, but the fraud department froze everything in his name. Julia helped finalize a legal ban from my property, and the new will was sealed, notarized, and secure. Not a dime to his name. He sent 2 emails. The first was angry. He said I overreacted and called me paranoid. That one went straight to the trash. The second came weeks later, shorter and less venomous. It just said, "I miss you." That one I kept, not because I believed it, but because it reminded me of something I once said to him when he was 12 and grounded for lying. You only say sorry when you've lost the thing you took for granted. He never replied to that lesson. He didn't reply to this one either. Last week, as I poured tea and passed around scones, someone asked, "Do you ever hear from your son?" I didn't hesitate. I smiled and said, "He never really was mine, but now I finally am." They didn't ask what I meant.